Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome back to the Counties Experiment, where I've turned the top two divisions of the English football structure into a county-based system, where 44 counties are vying for their positions in two divisions. I've replaced the Premier League and the Championship, League One and League Two, deal with the remaining fodder. And if you've watched my introductory video, you know about all the movements between clubs in terms of players, because certain players have moved to their home counties. So now I've simulated 1 year, we get to see how those movements between clubs have affected things and how just turning them into counties have affected things. And the inaugural English Counties Premier Division was won by Merseyside. It was a two-way fight, surprisingly, between Merseyside and Manchester, which is a metropolitan area, but there's obviously two decent sides that have merged into Manchester there. Arguably, the most surprising thing of all here is the fact that London, with all the clubs that have merged into it, were fourth. I know I used Spurs as a base, but I wasn't expecting them to Spurs the league. West Midlands with a surprising third, Tyne Wear with a fifth, and Hampshire, actually, sixth. Hampshire surprised me a little bit. West Yorkshire presumably have won the FA Cup to get Europa League football again next year. Apart from that top two, you can argue it's a well-fought contest between all the other remaining Premier League sides, because Lancashire, Leicester, South Yorkshire, Hampshire, Tyne Wear, West Midlands, and London, of course, their primary county club were former Premier League sides, Lancashire being Burnley, the lowest of those. West Yorkshire, Leeds, they were given Europa League football last year. They've got it again, but I do suspect that's the reason they're 10th. I do feel like that West Yorkshire would have felt the effects of being in the Europa League most out of the three clubs that are in it due to the lack of squad depth. They may have been given Haaland, but beyond that, their squad was no deeper than the original Leeds squad. I'm pleased they got into the Europa League again, because that will at the very least please Haaland. I am fascinated to know beyond Calvert-Lewin who scored what. Sorry, Haaland scored less than 14 goals. Didn't leave, did he? No, he scored 10 goals somehow. Okay, well, he scored 20 in 41 appearances in total, so he scored 10 goals. He scored 10 goals in 41 starts all total, so he scored about 10 in 10 in cup competitions on top of that league form. High average rating, surprisingly low output. This was one of the sort of mini experiments within this bigger experiment. How does Erling Haaland fare in his home county, technically, of West Yorkshire? Surprisingly not that well. James Milner having a stonking season back in his home county as well. Ruben Neves having a sensational season with 14 assists there. Will Prowse, expected. Bernardo Silva playing a surprising amount and getting a lot of assists. De Bruyne, expected. Maddison, expected. Matty Longstaff? Alright. And James Rodriguez actually playing for the combined Merseyside county. 8 goals, 9 assists, 30 appearances, 33 in total. More than I was expecting. But looking at that goals list, Che Adams actually chipping in with 14 goals to Danny Ings 17. I don't know if there's going to be an injury situation there or not. That allowed the other one to play more, but as you'd expect, really. Harry Kane, London, Aguero, Calvert-Lewin, 23. I mean, he scored 42, I think it was for me, when I bought him at Sheffield United in my Sheffield United save, so that's unsurprising. Jamie Vardy was 16 for Leicester again. Jamie Vardy is interesting because he's actually born in Sheffield, and this gives him an opportunity just to repeat the criteria for moving players. Jamie Vardy, whilst born in Sheffield and technically a viable option to give to South Yorkshire because he would definitely be one of their better players, it would have been to a massive detriment to Leicester. They couldn't be critical to the original club, and because the Leicester club was one of the county clubs as well, I couldn't move Vardy from Leicestershire, as they are now, and Sheffield United gained Calvert-Lewin anyway, so he wasn't that needed. That's why Jamie Vardy stays at Leicester. In case there were any questions about why certain players haven't moved, it's going to be because of one of those criteria, effectively. I explained it in the original episode, but just in case people are tuned out at that point. But looking at that league as a whole, I do believe East Riding of Yorkshire have just created a new worst record. Is Derby's 13 points. 1 win, 9 draws. In fairness, East Riding were just Hull, plus Daniel James, because he was born in Hull. There's no other major locations of East Riding of Yorkshire that actually had players born in it. If I've missed any, I mean, there's genuinely a good chance that I've missed a few players because they were born in more obscure places. I can only search by city in the editor. I can't search by county. You can search by region, but that's too broad a strokes. You just get Yorkshire as a region rather than the separate divisions of it. So I can only search by cities. For that, I can only rely on city lists on the internet. So I could easily miss some smaller ones if they are in the database, because the city list in the Football Manager engine is surprising, and a few that they include and some that they don't. It's difficult, but it's actually gone largely as you expect. There's only, I mean, Hertfordshire, Norfolk, and Derbyshire go ahead of East Sussex, which is effectively just Brighton. A few of them doing a little bit better than an actual Premier League team. Derbyshire did have a few additions, of course, although Norfolk didn't, and Hertfordshire had one in the form of, ironically, Lallana from East Sussex. So not a lot there. I'm intrigued by any manager movements. There's not really. Nigel Pearson, Michael O'Neill, obviously. East Riding's manager was all sacked. Tony Pennock is the incoming. They didn't actually replace the manager. The caretaker just took over. He's not good. Michael O'Neill left for another job. I mean, that's the weirdest thing of this so far. Michael O'Neill's Fiorentina manager, because sure, why not? Warnock sacked upon relegation. Dorset sacked Jonathan Woodgate at the end of the season, and Leicester sacked Brendan Rodgers at the end of the season for unknown reasons, because they were 8th, I would presume. So it's worth noting there were 0 transfers in the original months at the beginning. Despite the fact that window was actually open, there were no transfers at the beginning in the summer window. The only transfer was one that still happened in the engine, that Ziyech goes to Chelsea. Even though he'd moved club, he still went to Chelsea, which was annoying. But there's a few loans for fringe players once we hit January, but there's not a lot of actual transfers. You get a few players coming in. Junior Moraes to West Midlands, Marcao to West Midlands again. A few actual clubs in League One are picking up players, by the way, from these existing clubs. Swansea grabbed Callum Elder from East Riding. Callum Elder, I believe, was one of the players of League One last year. So interesting. That one's interesting in that regard. There's not a lot of major movements. West Yorkshire get Christopher Martins Pereira for Young Boys. Tyne Weir gain Anel Ahmedhodzic. I've butchered that probably, but yeah, he develops quite nicely. Tyne Weir also get Ivanusic from Dynamo. Connor Goldson goes from Rangers to London, which annoys me. I left him at Rangers, despite the fact that he could easily move to North Yorkshire. And realistically, once I did the Haaland and Rayner transfers, I probably should have done this one. But he's moved to London anyway, so that's irrelevant. If I did another version of this, I would move Connor Goldson to North Yorkshire, because having been born in York, he falls into the same category as Ben Godfrey. Balbuena goes to Brighton, East Sussex, still relying on visual cues there. Edouard moves to Manchester, irritating. Lancashire pick up Alvarado. Mersey cry Karavaya from Kiev. Like, it's buying these players from non-top league teams. That seems to be happening. There appears to be loans between top divisions. Bellerin moving to PSG, for instance. And there's some weird loans as well, like Ferran Torres going to Tyne Weir. There's weird loans between top teams, like Anthony Martial from the combined Manchester area going to Mersey is a weird one. I should have noticed, actually, Arnaud Danjuma moving from Dorset to Lecce on loan is really weird, because he was one of the players of the Championship last year. You know, Ndombele moving to Manchester on loan as well. Like, there's these weird loans between the top teams, but not a great deal of transfer movement. We'll see more of that in future episodes, I would imagine. But yeah, slightly odd. But we've seen the top 20 teams. There's 24 other counties in the Counties Championship. Who got promoted? Who's going to replace North Yorkshire, Bristol and East Riding next year? And of course, there's some odd players here that stand out from the rest of the crowd in the Counties Championship. I can see average rating rise, one of them. Jarrod Bowen at Hereford has put in the best performances of the season. I noticed that Lincoln have won the playoff final, but it is Berkshire, which is effectively just Reading, and Northamptonshire. I'm very inconsistent on the, because in the editor you have full name and short name. The table uses the short name, so some of these are without the Shire. But yeah, Berkshire and Northamptonshire automatically promoted. Berkshire dominating the division. They were favourites. Lincoln via the playoffs in 6th is actually quite impressive. But the other playoff teams, Cheshire, Oxfordshire and Shropshire, with Joe Hart in goal. Trying to work out if there's any major surprises here, because Buckinghamshire were predicted quite highly. They're quite low down. Herefordshire, they were predicted quite near the bottom, so they've slightly overdone it, I guess. Durham, Northumberland and Warwickshire are all predicted near the bottom, so they're unsurprising. In fact, we can look at the season preview again and it will probably reconfirm that. Yeah, Hereford have done slightly well, and Buckinghamshire have done quite poorly. Bedfordshire, I guess, haven't done well because they just missed out on the playoffs, as did Cambridgeshire, actually. So the ones that were predicted to do well have done well, and the ones that haven't. Despite the fact they only gained Sam Clucas to their personnel, Lincolnshire will be in the top division next year, replacing what were effectively 3 championship sides, because Hull were promoted in real life. So who's done well on these score sheets? Considering that Northamptonshire had this strike force in the Dream 11, I can see Ivan Toney got 14 goals for them, Northamptonshire there. Matty Taylor for Oxfordshire getting 16. Bowen for Herefordshire getting 16. Sam Gallagher, who was an addition to Devon and Cornwall, getting 18. Callum Morton, who wasn't, getting 20 for Lincoln. Mikhail Mandron, I'm going to presume it's pronounced that way, for Cheshire, getting 20 goals. That's surprising, considering they had Jesse Lingard added to their team. The fact that he's got 20 goals. Maybe he's assisted a lot. And Adebayo for Bedfordshire, not an addition, 21 goals. No. The answer to the Lingard question is no, apparently. Ryan Wintle, top of that one. Morel, Omar Richards, who was actually in the medium 11, despite the fact he wasn't an addition to the league, at left back. Shandon Baptiste, who actually was an addition to Berkshire. I did forget that one. He was born in Berkshire, so he moved there. Brannigan for Oxfordshire, not an addition. Sanders, not an addition for me anyway. David Davis and Ebba Adams, not additions either. So, a few existing players actually in the top end of that. I'm slightly intrigued by clean sheets here because Carl Darlow was an addition, as was Christian Walton. Fascinating for the clean sheet side of things. Joe Hart not there, and neither is Alex McCarthy, who went to Surrey. The Shropshire 5th, and he did play those games, but not enough. 37 appearances, 34 conceded, 13 clean sheets. It was so close. And Surrey were one of the worst sides. 46 appearances, 56 conceded for Alex McCarthy. 10 clean sheets, though, not horrible, but he's just in a side that didn't really gain that many players, Matty Virtue being one of them. I should just say at this point, by the way, some of the players that I moved into these teams, I did nerf their wages so it didn't destroy the club financially. Jared Bowen, for instance. I mean, I suspect Hereford aren't doing great financially still. A loss of just over $1 million, but they're still in profit, so it worked out well. I sort of capped their wages at 20 grand a week. I felt that was sort of sensible for a championship side. I mean, their wage structure is insane. They've got the 2 players that I gave them and then nobody else above, well then one other player above. Did I give them Lee Burge, actually? They've got the 3 players I gave them because I think I gave them Lee Burge as well as Connor Wickham and Jared Bowen, and then nobody above. 500 quid a week apart from my loanee. It's still the same Hereford squad. The bottom end of these divisions are still effectively the Vanarama teams that they were before. But interesting, thanks to Jared Bowen, though, that Herefordshire, despite being just Hereford with 3 extra players, did do better than Yeovil, plus a couple of players, and Crawley, plus a couple of players. Crawley League 2, so particularly impressive that they got ahead of them. Otherwise, very unsurprising. Tell I. Sorry, it's not Crawley, it's Woking. Their badges are quite similar at a distance. West Sussex are Crawley. Actually, they've done really well considering then. They've been in some League One teams. Get where they are? Quite close to the playoffs, actually. So, good going from them. The Champions League was won by Merseyside, who beat Inter Milan, Barcelona, Ajax, and Atalanta in the knockout stages. London did get through to the first knockout round. They lost to Inter Milan. Manchester didn't get through. They were in a group... Manchester were in a group with Inter Milan and PSG. Inter Milan surprisingly dominant in that group. Leicestershire were in a group with Barcelona and Juventus, so that went as expected. But they did drop into the Europa League, so they might have done well there. Europa League, which was, I could just say actually, the holders are Manchester. They beat Napoli in the final. So the greater metropolitan area of Manchester do have a Europa League. We go to the stages for that one. We see Manchester's run to the final actually included beating Leicester and Rangers. Rangers beat Dynamo, though. Leicester beat Real Sociedad and Hoffenheim. So they're quite good scouts for Leicestershire. It's still just effectively Leicester, that team, so that's good going from them. Erling Haaland's West Yorkshire were beaten by Napoli on their route to the final. But they did beat Villarreal, the actual winners of the Europa League in this particular season. So good going from them. 5 goals there in that match. I imagine some of them were Erling Haaland. And West Midlands, the other team in here, were actually also beaten by Manchester. I just realised I ran through Leicester's run through, not Manchester's there. Nice and Rennes, actually, for them. Camavinga's Rennes. I wonder what Camavinga's doing in the game. He's gone to Real Madrid in real life. But yeah, Manchester, somewhat free scoring on their run through to the final. 5 goals there, 4 goals, 6 goals against West Midlands, 5 against Leicester, 2 in the final. Just curious what the English team's groups were. Oh, Tyne and Wear. Oh dear. In a group with Real Sociedad and Benfica, Tyne and Wear came unstuck. Probably why they did well in the league, actually, if they didn't have commitments in the second half of the season. But West Yorkshire dominated their group, including a Cypriot side I do notice in the form of Omanoia. I may be doing another Cyprus experiment after this particular one, provided there's a database that I can manipulate. Oh, another Cypriot side, Limassol there in West Midlands as a group. So English teams versus Cypriot teams happened twice. I'm curious by their average ratings. just going to order Tyne and Weir by appearance. Henderson, Pickford, naturally. Jamal Lewis, Sam Maximan, Manquillo was the dominant right back. In the team that includes Jordan Henderson, Jordan Pickford, and Giovanni Reina, Javi Manquillo is the first choice right back. They didn't sign anyone, of course, so that's probably part of the issue there. Though he wasn't the last played right back, apparently. Emil Kraft played the last game for them. Yeah, I really hope they'll improve their team. Obviously, they've got the money from the Europa League group stages, whatever they got out of that, and then finishing in the top 6 again, they'll got money for that. So hopefully, £81 million release clause on Anel there. That'll be a nice little profit if that gets triggered in the future. Giovanni Reina, 1 year in, doesn't look that much better off the bat. I actually look at his development. No, I can't. Without becoming their manager, I can't have a look at that. But he did well. 10 goals, 2 assists, and 28 starts. Isn't bad. In case you're joining me at this stage and confused by Giovanni Reina's in Tyne and Weir, he was born in Sunderland, like Pickford and Henderson. It's kind of annoying that Tyne and Weir's 3 big additions are all from Sunderland and not Newcastle, as a Newcastle fan, but I'll take what I can get. Oh, Joe Willock, interesting. Obviously came from Arsenal. 8 appearances, didn't really appear that much. I suspect he'll get an upgrade in the game for FM22 though, so that's probably largely down to that. And I did want to have a quick nosy at the Sky Bet League One, which of course now features all the teams that have been ejected from those top 2 divisions. Now, the first thing I noticed from this is there's not really been any poaching from these divisions from the big teams. There's still some decent players down here. I can see Olivier Giroud has moved to Al Ain, but that's not a county's team. So what I like about this is because they did nerf all of the reputations for the teams that have been moved down into these divisions. They're not picking up big players. They are nicking players for about $1 million, $2 million. I think there's a 5 million here, John Swift from Berkshire. But other than that, they're not spending outrageous amounts of money. These teams that are being shoved down here, like Man United, for instance. I've seen in Invert the Pyramid experiments that when, despite the fact that these teams are being dumped in the bottom divisions, they still spend money like they're a Premier League side. Because the reputations have been nerfed, that's not happening. But good to see that's actually working. Obviously, this Ziyech transfer is annoying, but he might get picked again. Because it's a pre-arranged transfer, I think he still just moves to Chelsea, despite the fact he's not at Ajax to start with in this database. Still some good goalkeepers down here. For instance, Odegaard probably should have been merged into the London side, but other than that, I expect to see some of the better players from this division being nicked in the future. Man United, I noticed, now high up in the prediction list, despite being 20-1 originally. Chelsea were 150-1 originally as well, I seem to remember. So they've recruited well for this division, seemingly. Whilst they've not spent a lot per player, they've collectively, Chelsea spent 8 million, which is a lot for an effective League One side, but it's not outrageous. Now, when I moved the Premier League teams down, I removed all the managers. I clearly forgot to remove Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who, hilariously, was still sacked. Chelsea's manager was sacked as well, which was Eusebio went into Chelsea and then got sacked, because they still have reputations not far off from low-end championship teams. They still get managers of that caliber. So I don't know if Eusebio is I don't know if Eusebio is a particularly good manager or not, but Sanchez Flores, not surprising to see him in the championship, so it's not that surprising to see him go to Palace here, for instance. But then he was sacked anyway, and Marco Silva took over, which is a little bit more surprising, perhaps. But Danny Cowley went into Aston Villa. But some of them haven't actually sacked their manager. So Arsenal, okay, I forgot to remove Arteta. I don't know if that says something about Arteta, really, but I was kind of hoping some of these managers that have actually gone into these clubs. Sam Allardyce went into West Ham after being removed from West Brom. Forgot to remove Scott Parker. Actually, I think I left Scott Parker in on purpose. I didn't think that was too weird. Obviously, I removed Ancelotti, who took over at Everton. Dean Smith, who I removed from Aston Villa. I don't know why these managers are moving to equivalent clubs. Hopefully, some of these managers will eventually get picked up by Counties Premier Division and Counties Championship teams in the future, but there's a lot of movement sideways from the managers I removed. Gary Monk is manager of West Brom. Like, there's a lot of managers here that have been put in that wouldn't be surprising in the actual championship. So seeing them move to the high-end teams here isn't that surprising. It's just annoying because I want them to go to counties teams, ideally. However, that effectively deals with everything that could have happened in Season 1 here. I will go forward 4 more years for the next video. I'll see you for that one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're enjoying this. If you want to see anything in particular, let me know. If you are interested in the database, I will make it available. I'm not going to develop it any more than this, other than do that Connor Golson transfer. I will make it available if you want it. So, thank you for watching. Ta-ra.